Welcome to episode 2 of Tracing the Rails. I'm Stephen Cranford, your presenter and guide as we continue to explore the lost Steyning railway line. I'm here at the cement works at Upper Beeding, currently owned by Dudman Group, which is one of the amazing stops we'll be examining as part of this episode. Once again, I'm joined by transport historian Mike Jaimes, who will be exploring ticket printing and station advertising. So join us as we trace those rails.
Winding through the heart of Sussex.
Welcome to episode 2 of Tracing the Rails. On one of the blusteriest days we've ever recorded on, I'm here at Shoreham Toll Bridge. This is where we ended episode 1, and this time we'll be heading north into the countryside and our first few villages along the Steyning Line. If you're not sure where we are, let's take a look at the map. We join our exploration by the toll bridge right where we left off at the end of episode 1. Heading north, we come to the Shoreham Flyover and we'll stop there for a quick look at a place that once featured in a music album. Following the Downslink northbound, we pass the river on the left and the main road on the right on one of the much longer sections of track. We're heading towards the site of Beeding Siding Signal Box, where the track split out into the cement works and our main line continued on. We'll explore the site of the old signal box and the cement works itself, looking at some of the history and the remaining rail infrastructure. We then stop at the site of the first bridge where our line crossed the river for the first time, and some interesting remains that are still visible there too. We come up to St Botolphs Village and Church, also the site of a historically significant river bridge, and a platelayer's cottage with a few surprises to show you here too. We jump across the main road, which of course wasn't in the same position in the days of the railway line, and we steam into Bramber Station. On the face of it, a place that has the least to show, but you'll be astonished by the wealth of things we found there. Then a short trip up to Bramber Castle to look at a very different steam railway. What? A steam railway at the castle? All will be revealed. And we end our episode just before the Castle Lane crossing. So to recap, in this episode we'll look at the Shoreham Toll Bridge, Shoreham Flyover, Beeding Junction, the cement works, the missing bridge at the first river crossing, St Botolphs, Bramber Station and the Bramber Castle Railway. Let's start our journey at Shoreham Toll Bridge. Embarking on a journey back through time, we find ourselves at the old Shoreham Toll Bridge, a testament to historical ingenuity and a pivotal landmark on the coastal plain of southern England. Now, before the bridge's inception in 1782, traversing the River Adur was a formidable challenge, with options limited to a lengthy detour via Bramber, a precarious ford, or a ferry service which was often deemed dangerous and frequently impassable. Its dangers even warranting a mention in the later Act of Parliament that would endorse a bridge. This necessity for a reliable crossing led to the Old Shoreham Bridge Act, an ambitious project to construct a proper and substantial bridge that would finally offer a safer passage. This received royal assent on the 18th of May 1781. This endeavour, completed the following year, March 1782, only took 10 months to build and was a remarkable feat, funded by 50 share units held on a life annuity basis, raising £5,000 alongside the collection of tolls from those who used it. The first bridge was opened in 1782 by the Earl of Surrey. A newspaper clipping from the time said that 2,000 people ascended on the bridge for that occasion. It seems remarkable that this narrow road was once the main A27. It seems barely wide enough for one vehicle, let alone two, and the bridge behind me is even narrower, made of wood with just the occasional passing places. And the railway line ran just in front of me here. So this is a good vantage point for the signal box, which was just to my right. They had a good look up the valley and they could see the oncoming trains, and they made sure wherever possible they shut the traffic off so that the trains had a good run up as they headed into Shoreham, because it was a gradient into Shoreham town, which made it very difficult for them to get up without stopping. Now, the toll operators actually collected money out of the open windows of the traffic while it waited at the gates. The operators themselves based themselves out of the signal box, which is where this memorial sits today. Generally, there was just one operator or two at busier times. Now, the line closed in 1966, but the gates and the tolls still operated for about another year or two, up to 1968, when, of course, it was only running freight trains to and from the cement works.
Here's Maud collecting tolls at the old Shoreham Bridge with the signal box in the background, taken on January the 28th, 1944.
The early 1800s bridge tolls are an intriguing snapshot of past transportational costs. For example, a four-wheel carriage was charged 1 shilling, equivalent to about £5 today, with an extra sixpence or £2.50 for each horse pulling it. This pricing shows how travel costs were tiered by economic status. The difference in charges between two- and four-wheel carriages and additional charges per animal underscore the economic layers within travel. Livestock tolls, such as 1 shilling and 8pence, which is about £9 for a score of oxen or cows, signify the bridge's role in agricultural trade. The minimal halfpenny toll for a foot passenger, which was roughly 25p, highlights the bridge's facilitation of both commerce and personal journeys. Now, these historic tolls, while seemingly modest to us today, represented huge costs at the times, emphasising the value placed on the infrastructure and upkeep of the bridge. So fast forward to the time of the Steyning Line. Here are the tolls that were being charged around the time that motor cars were becoming more commonplace. For 80 years, this bridge remained under private trusteeship until the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway Company assumed control in 1861, close to the opening of the Steyning Line. This new ownership not only marked a new chapter for the bridge, but also integrated it into the broader railway network. The toll money was taken to Shoreham railway station to be counted and banked by the station staff, the toll collectors themselves being employees of the LBSCR and later British Rail. This 1904 oil painting by William Henry Boyd captures the loneliness and cold of a trudge through nearby Shoreham. It captures the bridge's serene beauty, a wooden structure spanning the Adur, a silent witness to centuries of history. It's fascinating, isn't it, to consider the bridge's role was here long before Lancing College and Chapel were even built, or the railway itself became part of our landscape. During the First World War, the bridge was rebuilt using the original 18th century design. And even though the bridge is made of timber, it could actually take the weight of a fully laden bus. Now, this didn't generally cause any problems, but there was an incident in the 1940s, and I'm going to read you a newspaper extract to explain what went on. The terrible storm of the 1st of January 1949, when a miniature whirlwind left a trail of destruction from Worthing to Shoreham and caused a double-decker bus to be blown off the old Shoreham Toll Bridge at approximately 6:30 p.m. Just as the driver drove onto the narrow bridge, a gust of wind wrenched the steering wheel out of his hand and swept the bus off the bridge into the River Adur 25 feet below. The conductor managed to jump clear and run to the Red Lion to telephone emergency services. Ladders were laid down from the bridge to the bus, which was lying on its side, half submerged in mud, amazingly with the lights still on and the engine running. Luckily, the tide was out. 9 passengers managed to climb up to the bridge, while the remaining 11 passengers had to be released by firemen. 3 Worthing passengers and 2 Lancing residents were retained in hospital. Miraculously, there were no deaths and only 1 serious injury of a lady, Miss Anna Voles, who was a Latvian chambermaid and who had worked for the Spaniard Hotel in Worthing. The last significant refurbishment in 2008, under the stewardship of West Sussex County Council, supported by the Heritage Lottery Fund, ensured its preservation for future generations. A West Sussex County Councillor, Brian Whipp, who you may remember from episode 1, used to be a toll collector on the bridge and helped lead the charge, collecting money in person, dressed in his old uniform at the time. The refurbishment completely replaced the pilehead crossbeams, deck support beams and handrails with selective replacement or reinforcement of some of the pile bents. It was reopened by Prince Andrew, and we can show you some footage of that day.
It was a very special day for Shoreham by Sea when His Royal Highness the Duke of York visited the town to officially open the newly refurbished toll bridge across the River Adur. The visit follows several years of hard work and fundraising by West Sussex County Council and the Old Shoreham Toll Bridge Community Trust to save this historic bridge. There's been a wooden toll bridge over the River Adur at Shoreham by Sea for over 200 years. Perhaps surprisingly, cars, buses and lorries were still using the bridge and paying tolls as recently as 1968, when it still served as the main route between Shoreham and Lancing.
Happily, the bridge was given a Grade 2 structural listing by English Heritage on the 12th of October 1954, and since then the bridge has become a much-loved pedestrian, cyclist and equestrian path, a tribute to its enduring legacy and a testament to local community spirit. The bridge's story, however, is one of adaptation and survival. The responsibility for collecting tolls shifted to West Sussex County Council in 1968 when British Rail withdrew from the bridge. The council shortly withdrew the toll after taking over, and then after a further 2 short years, the bridge would cease to carry motor traffic in 1970, becoming the very last public road bridge in Sussex to ever charge a toll. It's amazing to think that this narrow little path that joins onto the toll bridge was once the main A27. Up until the end of the 1960s, all traffic came through here and down the road here to the roundabout between the Amsterdam and the Red Lion pub, where it would either head south towards the coast or east along towards the hospital. If you wanted to go to the cement works, there was a road to the north, but it was much more like a little spur or a little side road rather than the main A road that it is today. It's incredible how things have changed in not that many years. The toll bridge was actually quite a dreaded landmark for train drivers heading south towards Shoreham. Do you remember earlier I mentioned the gradient of the line that started here and built heavily as it made its way up to join the line towards Brighton? Well, if the gates were closed for the track, it meant that they had to restart and didn't have enough momentum to get up that long climb. So there were rumours that little gifts were provided for the signalmen to guarantee that the gates were held for the traffic. So they would stop the cars in either direction to make sure that they could continue going. Now, it's surprising, isn't it, how little gifts and little rewards often kept the wheels of the railway industry running smoothly. So as we head north from Shoreham along the path of the old track, we're about to see something that no rail passenger would have ever seen. And in fact, it's nothing to do with railways, but it does symbolise two things. Firstly, the decline and the demise of the railway line, but the increase in popularity of the motor car, because 2 short years after the Steyning Line closed, they started building this. This amazing structure is the Adur flyover. It was a £2.7 million scheme that started in 1968, which in today's terms is well over £50 million. And it certainly shows how they were far more willing to invest in roads than they were in the railway structure at the time. Now, this is significant because this is part of the A27 Honiton to Folkestone Trunk Road scheme, an audacious project that they never actually finished, even to this day. It took traffic away from the narrow toll bridge into this superstructure dual carriageway flyover that's built of concrete and reinforced steel, and it also has slip roads in a complicated design that takes traffic to and from the A283. Now, we can get a good vantage point from it up there on Mill Hill. The producers have asked me to walk there, but I think I'll drive. Oh, incidentally, if you're a fan of Aha, rather bizarrely, they filmed one of their music videos right underneath this viaduct. Who knew? Well, I've made my way up to the blustery Mill Hill in Shoreham in the beautiful South Downs National Park, because look at this incredible view. We can get a really nice perspective on some of the things that we've been talking about so far. So right down there is Shoreham Port. You can see the old toll bridge, but what a spectacular view of the Shoreham Flyover. Now, construction of this started on the 1st of February 1968 by the construction company McAlpine, who oddly also make drain parts, so you might have a McAlpine trap under your bath. But looking at the landscape, you can see the enormous challenges that they were presented with. The purpose of building this road, of course, was to take traffic away from the old toll bridge, which by now was in desperate need of some maintenance. It also had the problems of the landscape. The valley was very low, you've got a river to contend with, but also on this side you've got an enormous hill. So what were their options? They could try tunnelling, which would be costly and very difficult. But in the end they opted to build a very large cutting, which you can still see today. Let's take a look. Well, from up here you certainly get a great vantage point of not only the cutting but also this bridge that was built at the same time. Now, the first vehicle to unofficially travel across the brand new shiny A27 was in March 1970, with the road officially opening 2 months later in May. But what was rather odd is that the slip roads on and off weren't functional until July of the same year. Now, before we explore too much further, I met up with our helicopter pilot Alex to take a look at the next sections from above. I'm above now the cement works, and that played a very important part for the railway line right up to the early 1980s, because the line from Shoreham to Upper Beeding remained open just for that purpose. Now I can make out the route of the railway line before it crosses over the river. Now I've driven past the cement works countless times on the road, but I had no idea it goes so far back into the countryside. I'd better ask Alex to land so I can take a proper look from the ground. Now, there's one thing for certain. You can't really claim that making a TV documentary is super glamorous, because look where I am. I'm in this little derelict piece of what looks like wasteland that hasn't been used for many years. But this location has a special significance that goes back 300 years to 1725, and there is a very important railway connection. Because here there are actually some railway lines, because I'm at the cement works at Upper Beeding. This has been used by the railway since its opening in the 1860s, right up till 1981 when the line closed. So these tracks have been here for 160 years, along with, of course, the obligatory Budlier. Now over there is the Downslink footpath, and this is where these sidings joined with the original main line. Now, I'm very grateful to Dudman, who own this land, because they've granted us special permission to film here, which they don't do very often at all. So let's make the most of the opportunity and see what else survives of the old railway line. You can see how long the lines have been out of use. There's a tree growing on the track. Now from here you can see the tracks are diverging with a set of points. Actually, up ahead of me here, this is where there used to be a loco shed, and it burnt down in fairly recent years due to a fire in a vehicle that was parked nearby that spread across. Now, by 1883, the cement works was in full swing, and the railways played a really vital part of that. Prior to the arrival of the trains, all business was conducted via barge, which was slow and cumbersome. So once the railways were here, business was booming for the cement industry. Originally under the name of the Beeding Cement Co., it changed hands a few times before it eventually became the Portland Cement Company, who made Blue Circle cement. You're probably quite familiar with that brand today. So the double tracks here going through this building, which obviously had some key function in the past, and a set of points here so you could swap from one track to the other. Now, as the industry grew here, so did the burgeoning workforce, and they actually built a series of cottages up at Dacre Gardens so the workers could live near their place of work. But this isn't all about sand and cement, it's also a story of survival. During World War II, in the morning of the 29th of September 1940, a group of what's estimated to have been 4 German bombers attacked the works, dropping a total of 16 high explosive bombs, many of which hit the factory and our Steyning Line. A member of the Shoreham Home Guard by the name of Bazin, who also worked at the cement works, witnessed the bombing of the railway line and, realising that a goods train was due, ran down to the line waving a lamp and managed to stop it. Miraculously, the factory rebounded swiftly. The machinery was spared, allowing production to soar back to its peak in no time. This resilience underscores the spirit of those who worked here, a spirit that endured even as the Portland Cement Company rebuilt and modernised the site between 1948 and 1950. You can see in this big expanse here that the tracks have opened up into 4 separate railway lines, all connected by a series of points. But over here, what I have noticed, something that's quite interesting. Now, you might notice something a little odd about this track. On this side, there's just a single rail. Yet on this side, there appear to be 2 rails. Why is this? Well, this track has got quite a sharp curve in it, and curves can be a real problem for trains, and they can often derail. So the solution was to put this second line, or check rail, inside the running rail to make sure that the wheels stay on the tracks correctly. Now, aside of the cement, this place is part of a much larger industrial ecosystem. The railways were used to connect the factory with other industries via the ports and other transport networks. And even though the factory has stopped making cement itself and the place is going to be redeveloped, I have every confidence that it will live on and learn to adapt with resilience to something new in the future. However, side by side with that adaptation and the redevelopment, there's one thing for sure, and that is that these traces of the old Steyning Line are bound to disappear. Now, it's weird, right above me is the A283, and I've driven along it countless times, but I never particularly realised that there was a tunnel underneath it. Now, what you might notice is that these rails are embedded in concrete, but if we look back at some of the photographs, there were occasions where the sleepers were exposed. There were many trains that never left the cement works. Some were very special or unusual, often having the ability to switch motive power to tipping power. Many of these units were able to tip trucks full of heavy lime or chalk or aggregates into and out of furnaces. There were many special and odd units that could be seen, along with the usual, more familiar locomotives and goods wagons. Some wagons would be shunted into the works onto a platform, and the whole platform itself would be tilted at an angle to tip the contents of the wagon into a silo, hopper or conveyor. Now, a quote from the production line at the time: "The chalk was brought into the wash mill, which ran along a small internal railway. These trucks worked on a hinge so that the load was easily tipped and the contents emptied into the mill's mouth. On either side of the store are rail tracks, and the trucks ran up them under cover. As each truck is filled, it is covered with a sheet. After this, the trucks leave the works and their contents are not touched until they reach their destination. Every precaution taken to ensure their arrival at the consumers in a perfectly dry state. There was space for 20 trucks on each side of the store, and their total contents, when full, equaled around 200 tons of cement. With an efficient staff of men, this quantity could be loaded in an hour." Constructing a railway network uses a huge amount of materials, and the cement from this factory was used heavily. In fact, the London and Brighton South Coast Railway held a contract with the cement company for 13 years. This absolutely vast chalk quarry represents 300 years worth of excavation, and even though it stopped being mined in 1991, it is still a fascinating place for geological finds. Many interesting fossils have turned up here, and even though it's no longer in use, I would like to thank Steve Dudman and the Dudman Group for granting us explicit permission to take a look. After all, it is still private land. Now, as I'm making my way northbound, we got the cement works on the east side of the Downslink path, and we're entering now this rather overgrown tunnel of foliage. Because the foliage is so overgrown, it's quite difficult to place exactly where we are, but somewhere around here the line spurred off into the cement works itself. The cement works had a fairly extensive network of tracks and sidings, so much so that it warranted having its own signal box. That was somewhere around here, and it was called beading sidings. Now, we're very grateful to Anders, who sent us some photographs of the box, not only from the outside but also from the inside. Now, we could see from those photographs of the beading siding signal box that it was built on a slope, but there was some kind of base, and even though the box is long gone, I'm curious to know whether there's any signs of the base remaining. Now, we know, I can see through here that the cement works is there, so we know that it's around here, but the problem we've got is it's all so overgrown you really can't see anything. But we've done some homework for you. We looked on some old Ordnance Survey maps, found the position of the box, and with those coordinates we've converted them into 3 words that you can search using the What 3 Words app. So if I get that going and type in the words, typically term arming. Don't get that wrong, or you might end up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or somewhere. Now, it says we are very close. We know it's going to be on that side, and it looks like it is about 10-15 meters away, which matches up with our position from the cement works. Just wait for a bike. So it should be somewhere over here behind this tree. I think I found something. Let's have a look here. Yes, there are 3 concrete pillars, like big piers. Now, we saw on the photo that this is built on an embankment. The field is quite far below, and this is on quite a drastic slope. And these 3 pillars obviously had the box sitting on it. I'm so pleased we actually found it. Now, we're on an embankment here. I can see the fields down below, and actually I think this is another clue. This looks like railway ballast because, of course, they took the lines and the sleepers away, but they would have never shifted all this. Of course, the Downslink footpath is quite narrow, but this was a double track, so it's highly likely that this ballast is from the old Steyning Line. Now, of course, the product made at the cement works had to be distributed, and from around 1970 onwards this was largely done by road. Prior to that, of course, they had their very own railway line, but there was actually a third method, and that was to use the River Adur. There's in fact a wharf that we can still just about see today where goods were loaded on and off the barges. However, one thing that I want to point out to you is that I'm on the Downslink footpath, and here there is a very sharp bend in the path. Now, railways don't like bends, so what actually happened here? Well, looking at my dad's trusty old Ordnance Survey map, it shows that the railway went straight on over the river. Let's take a look and see if we can see signs of that old bridge. So this is the point then where the railway line, having passed the cement works, goes straight over the river towards Bramber. The bridge, of course, long since gone, but you can still see signs of the old abutment on that bank. And further up there was an additional little halt called Botolphs Halt. Now, do you remember I mentioned the wharf? That is up here on the right-hand side as I look at it. Still very visible to this day, and what's remarkable is those timbers are probably around 200 years old. Now, I need to get to the other riverbank, and of course, not having a bridge here, it means I've got to go the long way round. But do you remember the timeline we had in episode 1? Well, we've added to it, so take a look at that while I make my way to the other side.
Shoreham to Brighton line and Shoreham to Worthing line merged and became the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway. Parliament gave permission for a Shoreham to Steyning line, but the work didn't go ahead and the permission lapsed. Local residents formed the Steyning Railway Company, SRC. Local residents met in the White Horse, Steyning, planning a railway between Steyning and Shoreham. A favoured proposed route of the new line was the west bank of the River Adur. LBSC met in the George Inn in Henfield with a new route plan that served as many Adur places as possible. LBSCR and a rival company both filed their line proposals with Parliament. The route we know today, LBSCR, was approved by Parliament. 1st of July 1861. The line was opened between Shoreham and Partridge Green.
So as I head north from the cement works, in order to cross the river and rejoin the railway line the other side, I'm on the lookout for the end of the beading sidings, because they were around about here. And I actually missed this the first time because they were buried in the undergrowth. But over here, between the buddleia and the brambles, is one of the original buffer stops of the end of the sidings. Buried, but worth a look if you're passing. What would have taken probably 5 seconds by train to get from that side of the river to here has just taken me ages to walk round. In fact, in the intervening time, the tide's come in. Now, this is where the bridge was connected to the land on this side of the river. If you're following the Downs link, there's an important thing to bear in mind here. The footpath continues on that side, so it doesn't follow the path of the railway line until you get to Bramber, which is over there. I want to take a look at the side of the river here and see what clues there are about the old bridge. Now, from the other side, we got a really good look at this wide section of land here. You can see from the other side where all the stones were piled up. And this footpath would have been here at the time. And above me, the railway line would have run along here. On the other side, they built a really neat stone archway. But here, perhaps they didn't have as much money, or they didn't care. It looks like it was just 2 concrete or block pillars. The bridge itself was a standard box girder construction, no doubt brought in by barge and then lifted onto the 2 pillars. I'm now going to make my way up towards the embankment and see if there are any other signs that there was once a railway here. This conveniently positioned bench might unwittingly give us our first clue that there are some signs here that there was once a railway line. In front of the bench are rows of bricks that have been put in position. Now, we could guess that this is something to do with the railway line, but what other reason would these bricks be here? It seems unlikely that they would have put them here
for a little footrest for people sitting on this bench, and they continue on around this corner in a slight arc. They are in exactly the right position for the railway line, so perhaps they are some kind of retaining wall or pier. We'll never really know. However, what I can see over there is a concrete post that has the old railway fences on it. Those are certainly good evidence that there was once a railway line here. The line continued behind me along that embankment between the trees, so I'm going to see if there are any other clues. Slight problem. The embankment ends here. I can certainly see where the railway line continues into the distance as it makes its way up towards Botolphs and Bramber. But with farmland on this side and fields on this side as well, it's apparent why they've cleared this embankment so that the crops and the machinery can just move from one side to the other without a tortuous diversion. We also suspect that this embankment is higher than it would have been when the railway lines ran here by comparing it to photographs. So it's feasible that the soil and the land that they scraped away from the embankment has been dumped here. We'll never know for certain, but I can certainly imagine and visualise those trains running up towards Bramber.
From here, I can't go any further north without crossing onto private land, so while I make my way round, let's catch up with Mike, who's exploring printing and tickets.
So, while Steve's off exploring, I thought I'd pop down to Bognor Regis and have a chat with Tom. Lovely to meet you, Tom.
Nice to meet you.
Tom is a letterpress printer and designer. Now, we set you a little task, didn't we, Tom?
You did,
We
yeah.
sent you one of our handbills, I say our handbills, from the old railway over in Steyning, and asked if you could recreate it, maybe with a bit of artistic license. And this is almost the finished product. Can you talk us through it a little bit? I mean, I noticed the letters are all back to front.
They are. So obviously when we set in letterpress, when you print it, it mirrors. So back to front, it comes out the right way around. So it's mirrored when it prints. So obviously we have all the lead type here. So this is a particularly nice little font. We've got one more line to sort of drop in and make. So to do that, we use a comp stick. So we composite our design. So we have to pick out each letter individually, spelling it correctly, obviously, because sometimes it can be a bit tricky when you're working effectively back to front.
I suppose, yeah. It's
And you just literally go through picking each letter, holding it with your thumb so that you can do that and not drop it.
These are absolutely beautiful. Am I right to
Sure,
pick
yeah,
one
feel
up?
free to touch one.
Excellent. Look, beautiful. Intricate carved out letters.
Yeah, so they were cast in lead.
And of course, I never thought about it, but you've got obviously different fonts as well, haven't you? I mean,
Yes.
on say Microsoft Word on a computer, you just click the drop down and select whichever font you want to use. Whereas this, you've actually got, you know, the names of the type fonts written on the side.
Sure, yeah, so you had each font would be different and each size of font would have a different case for and tray for. So then you'd have to change and you have to make it fit. So the type has to fit in the chase, which is the metal frame, and then the chase has to fit in the printing press, which forward in a minute will click it in to pull the print.
It's amazing.
So obviously you have to make sure it fits. So in this case on the comping stick, you can vary the length of this by adjusting it. So in this case I've made it the right sort of size, so I know I'm doing all right. Sometimes you can get a bit excited by some of the fonts. You think that'll be nice there, and then it just doesn't fit. You try and make it fit, but no matter how hard you try, it just doesn't work.
Yep.
So once we've got it set up in the comp stick, we put that down, and then we're going to pick it up, which is always the bit where it goes horribly wrong.
Well, hopefully not.
Because obviously they are all individual letters. So we managed to get it down in place. It absolutely does. And then we're going to put in the other bits, and in this case, because we're doing it a bit the awkward way, I thought I'd do a nice little font review as opposed to some of the more boring letters. Put in the little spacing material around it. And we put in coins at the bottom. So these are expanding blocks just to make it lock in place. We line it up, we use our coin key, we turn it, you can see the block expands out.
Yeah,
so this one was obviously previously owned by Roger,
Oh, right.
He did a rather terrible job of engraving his name on it, but it's a lovely thing.
That is wonderful. Look at that. It's quite heavy, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah.
Look at that.
And slugs made out of it.
That's amazing. That's ready for the printer, I think. So, Tom, this is a printing press like they would have used at printing their handbills for the railway, yes?
Sure, yeah, this is a Cropper Charlton Peerless. This is from about 1880s, this one. Wow. Industrialisation. We've set our type into our chase.
Right.
So put that to one side. We're going to ink the inking plate. We're going to be using just a plain black because that's quite traditional.
Okay.
Often black.
Wow,
it's
that looks like
oil-based.
tar.
It does look like tar. It kind of has that tar effect. It's quite old ink as well, so it does develop a nice skin on top.
Oh, right. Wow.
So we will use an old butter knife just to crack through the top layer. We're going to go for the ink underneath because the ink underneath is good.
Yes, we don't want to be printing in butter, do we?
Not really. A bit like my granny said about jam and mould on top. You know, you just go underneath. It's absolutely fine. So we're going to just put some on top.
Okay.
Then use the treadle plus. Bring the rollers up, and you can see.
Right. Okay. So that's fantastic. So it starts to spread the ink around the plate. And I suppose the turning plate means that it's getting fresher ink each time it would make the press. Yeah?
Absolutely, it constantly goes on here, so you can feed ink on from the right hand side, it goes round. This is also an inking unit, so you can have a third roller here, and it kisses the inking unit for more inking on. So if you were doing a run of like 10,000, 20,000, however many you want to do, you up the process by bringing it around like that. I don't recommend putting your fingers behind bits of printing presses.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
But you can see it just speeds up the process.
Cover the entire surface.
Just ideal, and you can see it's got so much pressure and power in it that when you take your foot off it, it still keeps going.
It still carries going. I suppose that's the kind of the weighted wheel keeping it
Absolutely,
going.
you've got the flywheel on the left hand side, which is surprisingly heavy, and it goes straight through the mechanism, and there is a bit of a counterweight as well. Wow. So what we do now is we're going to take the chase.
Okay.
Of our type, you can see gravity's not our friend at that point, so it has to be locked nice and properly. So that's what we did earlier. I'm going to put that just into the press. We're just going to drag it up to get a little bit of ink on it to just do a first impression. It's just to get a little bit of an idea. We'll use some scrap paper for the first one because you'd never use.
Don't use the good stuff.
Don't use good stuff, no.
Wow.
So the paper's a little bit thinner, this one, than what we're going to be using in a second. So you can see that gives us a good idea of the impression.
Absolutely amazing. Look at that. Look at that. A handbill as it would have appeared when the Steyning Line was running. So, having looked at advertising and printing for advertising, I think we'll pop down to the Bluebell Railway and have a look at how tickets were printed. Tom, thank you very much. I'm standing in this beautifully maintained early 1900s ticket office, and it's the perfect setting for us to show you a pivotal moment of railway ticketing history. Thanks to our friends at the wonderful Bluebell Railway, we're able to take a look at what one of the waiting rooms and ticket offices would have been like up and down the Steyning Line at, say, Henfield or Steyning or West Grinstead. Let's take a look at the booking office. Introduced in the 1840s on the Manchester and Leeds Railway, the Edmondson ticket system was revolutionary. Before, clerks would have to write down tickets for everyone waiting to travel, much as they had done on the stagecoach days. Can you imagine the queue outside these windows at commuter time, say, while everyone had to wait while their journey was recorded? Thomas Edmondson was a former cabinet maker and station master on the Newcastle and Carlisle Railway. His system obliterated the queues and also had the added benefit of stopping the dishonest practice that some clerks had of taking a skim off the top. So these tickets, standardised to precise measurements and thickness, pre-printed and serialised for accountability, were an absolute marvel of their time. They were stored in racks like this next to the clerks. They were top-fed, bottom dispensed for ease of issue, colour-coded to signify different routes, different ticket values, and made everyone's life an awful lot easier. Every aspect of these tickets, from printing to storage to dispensing, was based on these precise measurements. Another piece of technology to be found in the booking office was this, the dating press. The clerk would simply put your ticket in, punch it with a very satisfying thunk, and that would validate your ticket for the journey of the day. While the tickets were sold in multiple colours, they usually denoted different pricing, different routes, but the byproduct of that was that people started to collect the different colours, trying to get a full set for each line, etc., or station that they were using. Even today, people are very proud of their collection of tickets and the colour arrays that they have. Half-price tickets for children, dogs or bicycles were literally sold as half of a ticket, half given to the passenger and half retained. In the case of return tickets, they were cut diagonally and sold the same way. That other half ticket could then be sold on to another passenger or count towards a credit at the end of the day for the clerk's till. One of the most popular tickets that was available was the platform ticket. If you wanted to wave your beloved off on their journey or meet someone from the train, you could purchase one of these from the booking office for a penny each. More often than not, though, there was also a vending machine just before you got to the platform for the sale of these tickets. From short stops to grand journeys to London, these little tickets told an important story as part of the narrative of the UK's railways. With the creation of the Railway Clearing House in 1842, Edmondson's ticketing system had become a standard, essential feature, both in Britain's railways and across the world, a testament to its ingenuity and reliability. British Rail's paper and printing centre in Crewe had a good number of pre-1900 Waterlow presses, which were used to meet the annual demand of 320 million tickets. These presses were all turned off in 1988 and the Edmondson system withdrawn in 1990, with the introduction of the orange and cream Apsis cards that we currently use today. So, while digital systems have in the main replaced these tactile little tickets, at places like the Bluebell Railway, for example, here, the Edmondson system still lives on. Let's go and meet someone who can tell us a bit more about it. So, here at the Bluebell Railway, they're very lucky to have an Edmondson ticket printer. And they're also very lucky to have a Gerry to look after it and print the tickets. Gerry, it's lovely to meet you. So Gerry, can you describe this magnificent machine in front of us and also tell us a little bit about how it works, please?
Yes, it's actually a Waterlow printing machine designed specifically to print Edmondson tickets. Basically, we have a stack of tickets at this side, which are pushed through, push through here into the printing area. The printing area consists of three elements. There's a numbering section, the overprint and the main body. So at any one time, it's printing three different tickets and a different element on each one.
That's amazing. So how do you ensure the accuracy of the tickets, given the age of the equipment?
Well, the whole thing is locked together, so there is a cantilever movement that is linked to this, so every time it moves, it goes through the action of pushing another blank through. Each ticket coming through pushes the four in front of it. At any one time there are four in front of it, all being pushed along. And the size of the ticket determines the length of the push.
So are there any particular techniques or methods that you use to ensure sort of authenticity, I suppose, for the railway?
Well, we keep the design to the same as the original designs of Edmondson tickets. Here you'll see the top of this block is this is the return section, this is the outgoing section, and there's a line across the middle.
Wow. In
its day, the tickets were designed to be torn in half, so that when you'd done the outer journey, they would tear it in half and use the other half for the return journey, which would have a red letter R on it, as it
does there. That's absolutely amazing. Look at that. That's very beautiful. I shall give you that back.
Thank you very much.
So can you share any memorable experiences or memories from your time working on this?
We don't have any manuals, no guidelines at all, and it doesn't work the same way as a standard printing machine. And we would do runs of maybe 5, 10, 20, and it would jam. It would constantly jam and fail. So the first big milestone, I suppose, was when I did a couple of things to try and adjust it, and it took off, and we did 1,000 tickets, and my colleague was absolutely amazed, and I remember saying to him, "But Brian, that's what it's supposed to do."
Wow.
So yeah, that was the first milestone, and then I suppose once we'd done our first 1 million tickets, that was another milestone there. Yeah, we've done about 2 million now.
These tickets are really, really lovely. So Gerry, if any of our viewers want to get hold of one of these, how can they do it?
Well, it's quite simple, really. They come along to the Blue Bar Railway, they go to any one of our 4 stations, go to the booking office window and buy a ticket, and they'll get one of those printed on this machine.
That's wonderful. Gerry, thank you so much. Before we go back to Stephen, can I have a look at it working?
I'm sure we can.
This is St Botolphs Church, a Saxon building dating back to 950 AD, and our Steyning Line ran right behind the churchyard, just behind those trees over there. Now we think of the railways having been around for ages, but for this building it was a mere blink of an eye, because for the first 900 years of the church's existence there was no railway. Then the line appeared for about a century and disappeared once again. The church used to be the central point of quite a little community here. A few extra buildings were around that are now no longer here, and railway workers used to catch the train at an unofficial halt behind the church. The parishioners cottoned onto this, and they also used to hop on and off there, which was rather convenient for them. This Grade 1 listed building is owned and managed by the church's Conservation Trust and is listed as one of the 500 holiest places in the country. The church was originally called St Peter de Vete Ponte, or St Peter's of the Old Bridge. I probably said it wrong, so please don't write in. And speaking of old bridges, one of the first ever recorded bridges over the River Adur was over there. Incidentally, the land between the bridge and the church used to flood, so sometimes the people here still couldn't get to the other side of the river. The church was eventually rededicated to St Botolphs, and that's the name it's had ever since, along with the name of the village. Incidentally, phonetic spellings show that the name was formerly pronounced Botolphs or Buttles, not Botolphs as we know it today. Now Helen, one of the Friends of St Botolphs, has given me permission to do a bit of campanology, bell ringing. This is something I've never done, and this is my very first attempt, so it might go badly wrong. So let's just see. Have to get it going apparently. Look at that! Well, that's something I can put on my CV now. The things you discover when you investigate an old railway line. It's really hard to imagine the bustle that once surrounded the church. The railway that ran just metres away brought not only passengers, but also prosperity and a touch of the outside world to this quiet hamlet. Looking at maps that predate the railway, there really wasn't that much here, and modern maps of today show pretty much the same story, just a handful of buildings. When the railway was here, however, there were lots of buildings in this area. If anything, it was a much busier village then than it is now. Somewhere around here there used to be platelayers' cottages, and there were also some other railway related buildings up at Annington Farm, which is just behind me. These buildings were very basic and modest construction, but they were home to the platelayers who performed an important task for the railway. Each platelayer, or fettler, or lengthman as they were also called, was given responsibility for a mile or two of track, and it was their job to make sure that that length of track was safely maintained. So some of the things they would end up doing would be checking the tightness of bolts, checking the fish plates, and if they had any points, making sure that they were correctly greased. Originally, railways were L-shaped pieces of track bolted to plates. That's where the name came from, but as railways got bigger and faster and heavier, they abandoned that type of rail and had the familiar type that we know today, with the flanges on the wheels instead of on the track. So if you wanted to be a platelayer, what sort of person did you have to be? Well, physically you had to be very strong, you had to have lots of stamina, but crucially you also had to have an eye for detail, because the safety of every train relied on the integrity of the track, or permanent way as it was known. Alongside the track you might have found a platelayer's hut or line-side hut. These were little refuges that the platelayers would visit to store their tools, shelter from the weather, or make themselves a drink. They'd also plan their repairs there. Now, these were only made of wood, so very few of them survive these days, although modern equivalents are still used on the railways today. The platelayers' cottages were constructed from local materials, typically featuring a simple, robust architecture of corrugated metal or repurposed railway carriages, with perhaps 2 or 3 rooms. A small kitchen, a living area and 1 or 2 bedrooms would have been the norm, reflecting the humble means and the working class status of their inhabitants. Thanks to Jill Hanning on the Steyning Line Facebook group, we can show you what these structures looked like, along with a picture of Jill's mum as a 23-year-old in the early to mid-1900s. Hello Ruth.
Hello.
Stephen from Tracing the Rails.
Hello Stephen.
Hello, thank you so much for letting me come and see you.
You're very welcome.
Well, I'm delighted to say that we've been given special permission to film in a property with a very unusual railway connection, and I'm here with Ruth. Thank you for having a chat with us.
Welcome.
You have a special connection to this property, don't you?
Yes, I grew up here. My grandfather built it with his sons, and they called it Lads and I because of building it together. It's built of railway sleepers and asbestos.
Good combination.
Yes.
Not so much the asbestos,
no, not
but the
at all.
railway sleepers. How come this house is made of railway sleepers?
I'm not sure because it was built before it was built in the 40s, so I'm not sure where they got the sleepers from. My granddad used to be station master at Bramber Station about 1906, 1908. So I don't know from where, you know, I think from there he came here, so he must have been there quite a long time. I don't know where he went between that time.
But working in the railway industry, you think he had connections?
I think he must have done.
Built during the war then, and building materials in short supply, so it was quite common for properties to be made out of whatever was available.
Yes.
So being right next to the railway line, which would have been about 20 metres in that direction, I suppose railway sleepers then were a potential commodity that could have been used.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Now the outside of, you were telling me a little while ago, the outside was clad in asbestos.
Yes.
Now the present owners actually have taken that off and have redressed it in something a lot safer and a bit more modern. But they showed us photographs once the asbestos had been removed.
Yes.
What I found unusual, these sleepers are upright like soldiers, aren't they?
Oh yes, they are. Yeah, they were. Yeah.
What do you remember this then as a child? Because inside you can see them dotted around as well.
It was just a black and white bungalow built on the, to be a bit like St Mary's at Bramber, St Mary's house at Bramber. That I think was what it was supposed to look like, but obviously much later.
Faux Tudor.
Yes, yes, yeah. But that's, I grew up and that was just all I knew really. It's just I don't know how they built it because it was, I came here in 1950, 51 I came here. So both my grandparents who'd lived here died by then, both very close to when I was born.
So the railway was actually nearby. What do you remember of the railway line?
Well, it went right through the garden and I used to go to school on it every day from Bramber up to Horsham from when I was 11 till I was 16, 17. Or well, until the lines closed in the last 2 years we had to go by bus. But yes, you could tell the time by the trains. You just didn't actually really notice them, to be perfectly honest. In the summer with the sparks, they used to catch the fields on fire, with the stubble, once they've harvested and done the combine harvesting. So people used to go down with flappers to put it down because obviously the fire brigade couldn't get across there to do it. Yes, it was quite interesting living over here.
And you were so close to the railway line.
Oh yes.
But ironically, where did you have to catch a train?
Bramber.
Bramber, so that's actually quite a long walk in that direction.
Well, my mum used to take me in the car, but if we got a lot of snow, which we did in those days, I walked up the railway line and then left my boots at the station, got on the train. And then the farmer...
Walked on the tracks?
Well, beside it. There was always a track beside it where you could ride on a bike beside it, actually.
Yeah.
But the farmer... to farm, his son used to go the other way to Shoreham, so in the evening he'd bring me home in his Land Rover because he could get up the hill in his, if it was snow, but my mum couldn't, not in a car. So that's how we used to get. But the trains never stopped running because of the weather. I mean, now you know it's always leaves on the line, and but I can never remember the trains not turning up for you ever.
In 1966, the railway line closed, and the tracks were eventually ripped up.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes, yes, yes. I was still living here then.
Was that quite upsetting?
It was for the people, because most people, I think majority, didn't want the line to go. And I think once the track was taken up, that was like the end of an era. I think all the time they were down, you thought, well, it's a chance, you know, but once they're taken up, it's sort of all over. Speaking
of the tracks being taken up, you've brought in this wonderful photograph. This is who's this in the photograph?
That's my mum. That's your
Annie,
mum. Yes.
So this is Annie.
Yeah.
And this is an embankment at the back of your garden. Now there isn't this embankment anymore. It's been taken away. So that shows us how the landscape's changed. But there's a big stack of sections of track here.
Yes, they were the sleepers. They took them up and they just piled them all up out there, and they were there a long time.
And your mum's looking rather cross.
Yes, I think
this is like a local paper photo.
It was.
Look cross and
it
point
was a
at
newspaper.
The track.
Because I think people, I think she must have complained, but they were just there forever. And she said, you know, you're never going to move these because it was just like a black brick wall along the end there, opposite
and
the
two
bungalow.
Little goats as well. Were they yours?
They were my mum's. Yeah,
Your mum's goats,
yeah, they were her goats.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Ruth, thank you very much for sharing your memories.
Fine.
And here we are then, inside a house made of old railway sleepers. Well, this is now Farmer's Field, but the railway line was here. We saw it the other side on that big embankment. And what's interesting, I mentioned the Downs link because that's very synonymous with our railway line. The Downs link path comes along here, and this is the point on this little intersection of three paths that the railway line starts to follow the Downs link once again. But looking around, really there's not much out here at all. It's all farmland, and that's quite significant because when we look back on the history, all these flatlands were salt marshes, and one of the industries here was the harvesting of salt and also shipping. But as the river has silted up and made these two industries impossible, it's really only farming that sustains the local economy today. Botolphs itself is actually now smaller than it was in the time of the railway, which is quite unusual. In the latter half of the 19th century and the first part of the 20th century, and when the railway was really in full strength, there were extra buildings here like the platelayers' cottages. But unusually, when the railway went, so too did many of these buildings. Because how often do we look at an old photo or an old map and go, crikey, look how few buildings there are compared to today? Well, Botolphs really is the exception. But I'm just thinking here how wonderful it would have been to be a passenger on the Steyning Line. Looking around, we are right in the middle of the countryside, which is now the beautiful South Downs National Park. So looking for clues that this was the old railway line as we go from Botolphs towards Bramber. Well, the geography of this path are certainly a big clue. When we look at the path, it's a very gentle curve and a very gentle gradient in both directions, two things which are a requirement for a railway line. But if we delve into the bushes, there are also still some old lurking clues. Quite a few times in this series we've discovered old concrete fence posts, and there's one very decayed in there. This was the old railway fence, and in fact there's still a little bit of wire attached to it. There's another one down there as well. So it does give you an idea of the width as well. And looking at the land, we're on an embankment. Again, another thing where the landscape would have been changed to make sure that the railway was on stable ground. Now the path ahead curves slightly to the left, so my dad's trusty old 1957 Ordnance Survey map shows me pretty much where I am. I'm not that far from Bramber. Another thing to notice, of course, is the width of this path is only single track, but I can deduce quite happily that the other line would have been here because there's more of the fence posts that were at the side of the track. So we can conclude that the Downs Link footpath is on the southbound line, whereas the bit in the hedge is the northbound line. Remembering, of course, that when the Steyning Line first opened, it was just a single track. Now this is the A283, the Steyning bypass, and this is where the railway line actually ran, effectively crossing where the road is now, just in that little dip up there where the trees are. That's where the line would have run. Nestled 4 miles inland from the bustling Shoreham by Sea, on the west bank of the River Adur lies the tranquil village of Bramber. It's a place steeped in history. It was once a medieval military bastion and a port named Portus Edurni, where ships would dock at a wharf next to the enchanting St Mary's House, which is just a short distance down the road from here. But we're here to uncover the legacy of a different kind of trailblazer, the Bramber railway station. Because of the high levels of tourism at Bramber Station, they had to have specially extended platforms so that it could accommodate 12 coach trains. They achieved this by building brick fronts and then mounting up soil and putting grass on top. Bramber was also the holder of several minor records, such as the prettiest station or the best kept station, because they were very proud of their floral displays. For example, they had roses growing over the station building. It was also the longest rural station platform, and significantly for us, the only station on our line to have electric lighting. Today, there's little to suggest that this serene spot was once a hive of activity, a gateway for countless visitors drawn by Bramber's unique attractions. You might think that all traces of the station have vanished, but not everything is as it seems. Hidden in plain sight, there's a wealth of history waiting to be discovered, if you know where to look, and I'm going to show you some of it. Now, just to the north of this path is a charming garden belonging to a place called Robin's Haunt. And what's this I can see? The words Bramber written on the side of a shed. This is on private land, but we've been granted explicit permission to go and take a closer look. Bramber has had a number of industries over the years. One that was most surprising to me was the growing of lavender. I'm on a parcel of land owned by John Kellett, which is just north of the original Bramber railway station. John moved here in the early 1970s, and when he bought it, there was a large area of timber-framed cold frames that once grew lavender. The lavender was then shipped on the railway, which is only there, sent up to London where it was sold. Now, when John removed these cold frames and replaced them with more substantial greenhouses, he found a number of treasures buried in the land. I'm going to show you the best one of all. Out of all the things that John discovered on his land, this I think has to be the most charming. These are the original steel letters that once formed one of the running-in boards at Bramber railway station. These would have originally been on a big wooden sign on the platform edge so that the passengers knew where they were getting on and off. Mysteriously, the letter A was never found, so we got Bramber. He did make an A, so that if you're walking along the Downs Link or cycling along there, you can still see these original letters, a little glimpse of a piece of history. There are, however, other treasures to be discovered that you can't see from the road or the footpath, and I'm going to show you them. One of the other things that John found on his land was this section of rail. It's under 3 meters long, but the thing that's fascinating for me is that it is astonishingly heavy, which is a real tribute to the people who built the railway in the 1860s. And it's rather sad to think that perhaps you went to school from Bramber railway station, you would have traversed up and down this rail many decades ago, and now it's just sat in someone's garage. When the railway line was ripped up in the 1960s, nearly everything was taken away, but crucially, a few little bits survived, including these rail spikes. These helped hold the chairs down, which held the rails to the sleepers. I would like to thank the producers of Tracing the Rails. I'd like to thank my parents and my husband Paul for this award for outstanding contribution to disused railway lines in 2024. This is for you. I'm just a few metres away from the Downs Link footpath, cycle path and even horse path, and I'm very lucky that I've got a bit of an insight to things that you can never see from just over there, because unwittingly you are far closer to the Bramber railway platforms than you might think. Down here, this is actually the concrete base of the southbound platform. This extended for a length that could hold 6 coaches. We still got a few of the original sleepers piled up on top here, and there are a few fragments as well of the old buildings. We've got some tiles here and some bricks that were once part of the old station building. And a further bit of evidence for you to see is this fence post. This had a wire fence running along here on the land that was behind the southbound platform. We're very lucky here on Tracing the Rails that we've been granted access to private lands so that we can show you these hidden treasures that you might otherwise never get to see. And who better to bring those stories to life than the people who remember the station? Their memories paint a vivid picture of the attractions that once drew crowds by rail to Bramber. For example, the Potter's Museum, run by the famed taxidermist Walter Potter, the historic Bramber Castle, St Mary's House, which was once used as a Doctor Who location, and several quaint tea rooms and pubs, as well as the St Nicholas Church, affectionately called St Nick's by the locals. And there was once even a case where people did ice skating on the flooded fields just north of the castle. One mile to the South Downs Way. Now this junction, this big 6-exit roundabout, is a fairly hefty piece of road design, and looking at it you wouldn't think that it was ever any different. But when the railway was here, the roundabout didn't exist. There was a bridge here that took traffic over the railway line. It was quite a lengthy bridge that extended to well into where the roundabout is now. And at the beginning of World War II, they actually extended the width of it so that it could accommodate tanks. Let's find out more about Bramber and how it used to be when the railway was here. And what better way of doing that than speaking to someone who used to live here. Here we are then in the beautiful village of Bramber. Very chocolate box, very picturesque. But would it still be like this if the railway was here today? We'll never know, but I am delighted to be with Phil Hoare, because you used to live here and you're going to share some of your memories of this village.
Yeah, I mean, when the railway was here, this was the main drag to Washington and Horsham.
Because of course the railway is now the bypass where
Correct.
all the traffic goes. So this used to, I mean, there's still a few cars today.
Yeah, it was a very, very busy road. We had the cement lorries coming through, the Blue Circle cement lorries coming through. And the house where we lived in, which I'll show you when we walk past, used to shake sometimes.
Gosh.
With the house, you know, with the lorries that used to come. But yeah, it was. We certainly missed the railway, but would we have the bypass now? So
well, that's the big question. Should we
question.
take a look and have a
Yes.
little walk up through the village?
Yeah.
Because when I come through Bramber, I'm always very taken by the fact that it's so old and flints and ancient houses, and even unusual places like this. This is the Potter's Museum.
Potter's Museum.
Potter's Victorian Museum.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like a sort of Salvador Dali kind of place.
Then became the House of Pipes when the museum was sold off.
Yeah, and Bramber Villa, look at that.
Well, the owner of the used to live here, so Mr. Collins, Ellie Collins, used to live there.
And the lovely thing about the village as well, you're looking up on the hill, you've got the remains of the old Bramber Castle and the church there.
Yeah.
It's very, very classic British village, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, the church and the castle reached 950 years old last year.
Wow.
So one of the oldest churches in the south of England.
That's a good anniversary, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is the house that I lived as a child. One of the houses that we lived in.
Woodstock House, as it's called now.
Yeah. It used to be called Whitehaven when I was there.
And actually, for you using it to get to the railway line, it's only about a 3-minute walk, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we still get buses coming through here.
Yeah.
Now, you can imagine if this was the only road, we got a car backing up here to let the bus through.
Yeah.
It must have been really difficult.
It was very difficult, yes. Yes.
That's the number 2 Shoreham to Steyning service.
Well, it used to be in the number 22. It was the southern
and the old
service.
Southdown buses.
Southdown buses, that's right, the old green buses. So, and then that used to be a restaurant, Lavender Cottage.
So this building here, very low windows.
Yes.
I mean, the upstairs, look, you could do.
I never went upstairs, but downstairs there was a nice, lovely restaurant, Oak Beams, and I worked in there as a waiter when I was in my teens. So
you must have been stooping a lot.
I was stooping a lot.
Now the landscape here, I was saying to you earlier that you can't really see any kind of visualisation of the railway line because it's all been changed, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. But you can see here across the thing where the road dips down, it actually would have gone over there.
And
so
that would have been the bridge. So basically the roundabout was never there?
No, it was the bridge. And then the bridge to Clay's Hill, which is the road that goes up to Steyning.
Gosh. So this at the moment then, the road out of Bramber Village was the main road.
Yes.
It would have all crossed over the railway at this bridge.
Yes.
Robin's Haunt, which features in this episode, that's the land that's right next to the station.
Yes.
We're going to take a little walk down here
then. We are.
To the old railway line.
So where they're walking from is where the path to the station was. And it was a steep path, because you were going downhill.
So actually about here, we're on the bridge over the railway line. You can actually see, if you look this way, there is still a cutting, isn't there?
Yeah.
Gosh, with all the, I mean, look how big those trees are that are growing where the track was.
So the path would have gone down, probably down here somewhere. There was a single, very narrow path, but very steep. Used to go down to the platform.
Should we go and stand on the old tracks?
Yes, let's do that.
Now, of course, many people would have got off the train at Bramber to go and visit the castle, but did you know there is an unusual railway connection with the castle? We sent Mike to find out more.
So, while Stephen's just down there, exploring the site of the old Bramber station, I thought I'd take a little walk up the hill, a couple of minutes away, to see the remains of the old Bramber Castle, which of course has stood for several hundred years. In the 1930s, however, it was the site of a miniature railway. Let's go take a look. This is what I believe was the platform of the miniature steam railway here at Bramber Castle. And the castle itself is Norman in origin, dates back over 1,000 years, and unfortunately there is no trace whatsoever of the miniature steam railway that ran here in 1935. Bramber's a beautiful place to visit, irrespective of whether there's a railway here or not. You can come and look at the wonderful views over the Sussex Downs, play football with the kids, exercise the dog. There's even a car park to make it easier to get to, but no steam railway. However, we have discovered that one of the locomotives still exists.
The Silver Jubilee is a truly magnificent coal-fired live steam locomotive. Built in 1935 by Bullocks of Farnborough, this locomotive, one of 7, was initially named Princess Marina before being rechristened as Silver Jubilee to mark the royal celebration of George V. Originally built for a Mr. Cookson, Silver Jubilee graced the tracks of Billingshurst, Bramber Castle and the Shoreham Miniature Railway. By 1938, she was steaming proudly on the Surrey Border and Camberley Railway. Sadly, the railway's fortunes waned, and by November 1939, Silver Jubilee was in the hands of the receivers. Now, Silver Jubilee is back with her sisters on long-term loan at Eastleigh Lakeside Railway. She's reunited with the Empress, her old stablemate from Billingshurst, and they both stand as testaments to the golden age of steam. Back to you, Stephen.
I'm here in Bramber with Jan Holden, who very kindly got in touch with us about this photograph. This is a wonderful picture taken at Bramber railway station. What's your connection to it?
Well, the picture is of my grandmother, Doris Howland, who lived in the village and used to use Bramber station to go to places like Brighton. On this occasion, she was going to the wedding of her niece in Horsham, and it was actually taken on the 30th of June 1960.
It's quite unusual to have such a photograph, because normally railway enthusiasts took pictures of the trains principally, but also the tracks, the buildings, the bridges, the signal boxes. But your grandmother, seemingly the only person there. Do you know who took the picture?
I'm sorry, I don't actually.
You don't know?
No.
But it's a wonderful memory. So you used to come down to visit family in Bramber. And where did you live at the time?
We lived in Feltham, near Heathrow now, and we used to catch the train from Feltham. That would be my mother and my brother and I, from Feltham to Clapham Junction, then run across the bridge at extremely fast pace to catch the train down to Brighton.
Because your London train probably pulled in at platform 2 and the Brighton train was platform 18.
That's right.
Yeah,
I can remember the rush to get over the bridges and down onto the platform so we could catch the train. And then we'd come down to Brighton. I don't quite remember the journey to Brighton, but I can remember getting off at the station and going to the old platforms, some of which still exist, and we used to catch the Steyning Flyer, as it was called, to Bramber.
What do you remember about the sights and smells of the Steyning Flyer?
Well, to me, I was quite young, but I just remember it being a bit of an old clackety train and a proper steam train, and used to smell of steam, and it used to stop at every station from Brighton all the way through to when we got off.
So it seemed to take ages.
It did.
Now, being a townie then, as you were, what was it like as you headed off up into Shoreham and up into the countryside?
Well, I think once you'd gone through the more industrial side of Shoreham, and then you met the River Adur, and then you turned off right up to the old branch line towards Bramber. It was just the view of the River Adur, it was the view of Lancing College, and just going up there and then stopping at Bramber, and it was just really sort of special to us because it was part of our childhood. And then you get to the station, and the station would always be incredibly well kept. There'd be lots of flowers, etc., and there'd be chickens on the platform, which came from one of the
running around loose.
Just running around loose, the chickens. I always remember that as a townie, that there was chickens running around.
How wonderful. And your grandmother in the photograph, did she live nearby?
Yes, she lived in one of the cottages in Bramber, opposite the Castle Inn.
Gosh. Well, I think she'd be fascinated that her photograph from over 60 years ago is now seeing a wider audience.
Yes, I think she'd be absolutely amazed and really chuffed.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much for sharing your memories.
Okay, thank you.
So, as we've seen, there's very little physical evidence of Bramber railway station anymore, which is why keeping the memory of it alive is such a special thing. And this is a perfect example of one way to do this. The Lost Railway exhibition, some sign installations that have been installed by a collaboration between the National Park, Sustainable Communities Fund, the Community Rail Network, and also the Steyning and District Community Partnership, chairman of whom is standing right next to me now, Russell.
Sure.
Hi, thank you so much for showing us these amazing installations. So tell me a little bit about them.
Okay, so I chair a group called the Visitors and Tourism Committee, and one of our big projects is the Lost Railway exhibition. It's been about 3 years in the making, but it's about really giving people that use the Downs link an insight into what Bramber Station was, and Steyning Station as well, and more importantly the Steyning Line in its entirety.
So they're great actually. If you do come along to Bramber, you must look out for these, and the plan is, Russell, that they're going to appear along the whole way of the Steyning Line eventually.
Absolutely. So as you can see on the Steyning Line itself, there's numerous stations there that we've already got support from Henfield and Southwater, and hopefully soon to be Shoreham as well, to do a very similar installation to this one in those locations as well.
So if you're walking along or cycling on the Downs Link, take a moment, look at these Lost Railway exhibition installations, and you can see all these fantastic old pictures. So you've got the information, you've got timelines and old photographs as well, some of which we have seen and will see on Tracing the Rails. How long did it take then from the idea to fruition?
3 years roughly.
3 years.
Funding's always a challenge for small community groups like ourselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was 3 years of love, to be fair.
They built the railway line in not that much longer than 3 years. It's amazing how things take a while now, don't they? Well, brilliant. Russell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We were very grateful here at Tracing the Rails that they invited us to actually open this installation. Let's see how we got on.
We are very excited as the Steyning District Community Partnership to be celebrating the Lost Railway exhibition boards that have now gone in. As you can see, went in December. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, so we're really, really pleased with them. I just want to do a quick thank you to some of the people that are here as well and the people that have been involved. Mainly, obviously, the National Park for their funding alongside the Community Rail Network and the South East Communities Rail Partnership for all of the work they've done to help us get that funding and secure the installation. Also, the Steyning Museum for all the brilliant work they've done, and our fabulous working party that have worked really, really hard to obviously get the information together and produce these boards. Obviously, without volunteers and those types of people, you won't get projects like this to happen. So we're very, very grateful, and it's exciting that it's now here and ready for people to use. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Stephen Cranford, who's going to do our opening.
Well, thank you very much, Russell. I've been amazed at the interest in this old railway line of ours that closed in 1966, and it's amazing that nearly 60 years later there's still an awful lot of fondness and love for the old Steyning Line, and the fact that we're actually standing pretty much where the track was all those years ago makes it extra special. So the fact that these Lost Railway exhibition boards are here for future generations to see what was here in the past, I think is a great thing that you've all achieved. And I'm very flattered that you've asked me to open these. Of course, Tracing the Rails Series 1 is focusing on the Steyning Line, and I've been amazed at the amount of things that I've discovered that are still lurking about. So I look forward to not only looking at these in the future, but also the other boards that will hopefully make their way north up the line towards Horsham, and maybe, who knows, on towards Guildford as well. So with great pleasure, I'm delighted to officially open the Bramber Lost Railway exhibition. Fantastic. Well, as we approach the end of episode 2, it's thank you and goodbye to Bramber. I have to say, I've been rather surprised at just how much there was still to be discovered of the old railway line between Shoreham and Bramber. But with many miles of the old line still to walk, it's onward to Steyning.
Winding through the heart of Sussex, where history unveils, exploring whispers, tales of steel. in every sleeper's silence, in every whistle's cry.
Next time on Tracing the Rails, we are here at Steyning, the town that the railway line was named after. As you can see, there would have been double tracks here, but it's now a road, the A283, the Steyning bypass. So join us next time as we discover more lost treasures. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our Sidings webisodes for additional content and material.
Tracing the rails.